Actually, August was a minute ago, wasn't it? And March too, when we came for the one-all. One announcement, there are a few flyers left for the Lunch and Learn series, and those are the old ones from earlier this year. Please make a note if you got one of the colorful ones that on July 2nd, Colonel John Cobb is going to be at the Appomattox Regional Library, not here. The Legion is closed that week. We'll remind you over and over. But the flyers that have the asterisk on them are in my car, and my car's in Richmond, so don't have them with me. So anyway, make sure to make a note on your flyer if you got one. Okay, today our title is Mystery, Murder, and Mayhem, and Jeannie's going to share with us solved and unsolved cases from Hopewell. The date on a vet murder, the milk bottle murder, and cold cases that still haunt us, the hanging in the Union Hall. Was it murder or suicide? Jeannie is always such an interest, and we're so thrilled to have her for our opener and our closer. Jeanie Lenore Langford was born in Narrows, Virginia, and has lived in Hopewell, Virginia since the age of 3. She graduated from Hopewell High School and attended the College of William and Mary, where she focused her studies on history. Ms. Langford is employed by the Appomattox Regional Library System, which serves the city of Hopewell and the counties of Prince George and Dinwiddie. She is the assistant librarian and archivist for the Ann K. and Preston H. Leake Local History and Genealogy Room, located in the headquarters building of the Appomattox Regional Library System. Ms. Langford is certified in museum management, having graduated on March 11, 2013, from the Virginia Museum Association's program. She is now pursuing an advanced certification. So please help me in welcoming Jeanie Langford.
Well, welcome back, everyone. It is always such a great honor and pleasure for me to be here with you all. But before I start today, I'm going to brag a little bit. I got a lovely surprise this morning. My granddaughter, Kaylee, rolled into the library with a card and some flowers, and she hadn't told me. We all live together. She hadn't told me why she was going to the beach, because I get a little hyperactive. Well, she went down to the beach. She came back yesterday. Nobody said anything. She walked in with the card and the flowers, and inside the card, Kaylee is now a nurse. She passed her state boards. So thank you for letting me indulge my ego a little bit. Mystery, murder, and mayhem. There is nothing further funny about murder or mayhem or even sometimes mystery. However, Hopewell has had its share of mystery, murder, and mayhem. Some of it is quite unique. Some of it is very sad, and I am going to share it with you. Of course, that's me. This is a photograph from the kaleidoscope of 1929. The young man in this kaleidoscope is William Lyman Newman. He preferred to go by his middle name so as not to confuse him with his father. As you can see, he was president of the class, the Sidney Lanier Society, the Civics Club, and the Junior Congress Club. Mr. Newman, young Mr. Newman, was in the class prophecy, and in the class prophecy, they all expect him to be running around, chasing pretty nurses as a doctor at John Randolph Hospital. All through high school, from the time he was 14 years old, he went to school during the day and worked the 4 to 12 shift at 2B's full time. He was able to achieve greatness in high school and at 2B's. He was very involved in the church, Weston Presbyterian Church. For years, he was the president of the Christian Endeavor Society, which helped young people get more involved with the church. He was an excellent fundraiser. This little group of people, young people at Weston Christian Church, Presbyterian Church, was one of the richest, I guess you'd call it civic or church-related organizations in town, and made up all of young people. Mr. Newman was 22 years old in 1924. He had just married. At that time, the country was kind of in unrest because it was the rise of the unions. And the 2B's workers, some of them were thinking about unionizing. Excuse me. So, some of the people involved with organizing the union lost their jobs at 2B's. Mr. Newman was elected secretary of the union, which meant he lost his job at 2B's. But he was getting paid by the union to work in an office. He went to work on April the 24th of 1934. On the street, he saw many of Hopewell's people, including Dr. Bodo of Bodo's Landing fame. So he went to work. And his office was upstairs in what is now Elliott's building. You went in the door on this side and went upstairs, and there was an office up there. So for many years, I always believed that when Mr. Newman was found hanging, he was hanging on the stairwell. But when I went back and rechecked, he was actually hanging in the bathroom upstairs next to his office. So Elliot was kind enough to let me come and photograph the bathroom that has been turned into a closet. You will notice this ladder. It's a fairly tiny bathroom, and Elliot has done a good job of keeping the graffiti on the walls. And these people actually really weren't ashamed of their graffiti. They signed their names and they dated it. So Mr. Newman was found by the president of the union hanging in the union hall, upstairs in the bathroom. He was only 22, and nobody could figure out why he had done that. The family did not agree that it was a suicide. When he was found, there was a bruise on his face, and his toes, or feet, they say feet, were touching the floor. Well, the family didn't believe, so there was a big inquest into it, and Dr. Bodo said it was a suicide. His original death certificate had said a murder, but it was changed. Now, what was curious about Mr. Newman, a family member actually told me this, was when Mr. Newman was found hanging, he was wearing a red dress. Now, I've never been able to determine exactly what that meant, whether it was some type of message from 2Bs who had hired Pinkerton detectives, or a message from someone else because they had murdered him. But the family never believed that he committed suicide. And to this very day, nobody knows for sure what happened to this vital, vibrant young man. Was he murdered in James Pool Hall, or did he commit suicide? Date on a bed murder occurred in August of 1936. It made, of course, there was no TV, no radio was still kind of young, but it made newspapers all across the country. A young lady named Elizabeth Phelps was arrested for murdering her brother-in-law, Howard Watkins. You see, she and her sister, she was living with her sister and husband. She was quite a beautiful young lady. So the sisters got to joking around, and the older sister, the married sister, says, "I bet you can't get a date with my husband." Well, she did. She went out with her brother-in-law on a date, which means she won some money from her sister. So they went down to Burrsville to one of the local establishments of moonshining fame and had a few beers and a couple of drinks of whiskey. Mr. Watkins brought Miss Phelps back to the house. Well, immediately, Miss Phelps went out with another man, John Scruggs, who was the next door neighbor who was also married. So she went out with him, and while she was out with him, she said, "Do you have a gun?" And he said, "Well, yes, I do." And she said, "Well, can I have it?" He said, "Well, what do you need it for?" Miss Phelps said, "Well, when I get home, my brother-in-law might be upset because I went out with another man." So Mr. Scruggs takes her home, and she goes to bed. Well, Mr. Watkins comes into the room and begins to strangle her. She shoots him 3 times, once in the leg, once in the arm, and once in the stomach. Well, they arrest her for murder. She is tried, and the judge gives very specific instructions. They reduced it to voluntary manslaughter, and the judge gave very specific instructions. Well, immediately, the attorney wanted to, of course, appeal. While she was still locked up in jail awaiting for her second trial, a reporter from Front Page Detective came to get the story. I have not been able to find that cover. However, as you can see, this covered national stories, and it was published the second week of October. The old city jail. Cupid lived in the old city jail because while Miss Phelps was locked up, waiting second trial, she met Clifton Abernathy. Well, it was a jailhouse romance. So they fell in love at the old city jail. So finally the judge says, I will give you bail while you await your second trial. And Mr. Clifton, the forger, was released the second week of December. She was released the first week of January. They went to North Carolina and got married. And they went on their honeymoon to Washington, D.C. While on their honeymoon, Mr. Abernathy was arrested again because he had forged checks in Blackstone to take her on the honeymoon. So he goes back to the Hopewell jail, and she's awaiting trial. Their trials are on the same day. And the judge throws out the conviction because basically, in his mind, it was a case of stand your ground. He was attacking her, and so she had every right to shoot him. So this is where they got married. And this is where she was acquitted of everything after the retrial. That is her sister giving her a great big kiss. And she goes immediately to the judge and says, I'd like to file for divorce. Because his trial was just shortly later. And he was convicted and sent to the state farm for 2 years. And she said, I'm not going to be married to a forger. Well, she got her divorce. She ended up remarrying and living a long, happy life in North Carolina. And the poor Mr. Abernathy spent a lot of time in jail. You even find him in jail in some of the census records. The milk bottle murder. Mr. Robert West and his wife were in their home, and they had a young daughter who was about 2 years old. Mr. West got up, went to the refrigerator to get a bottle of milk, and someone shot him through the window in the back and killed him. The milk bottle splattered all over the ground, and his wife, who was sitting in the living room, just thought he had dropped the milk bottle until she went in. Well, there were footprints outside the window, and Mrs. West, since 1948, had been having an affair with John P. Janosic. Mrs. West's brother, Jacob Smith, was a criminal. He had escaped from the penitentiary in South Carolina, and he was known to be in Hopewell on the night of the murder. So a nationwide manhunt was started for Jacob Smith. They finally found him in Louisiana and brought him back to Virginia and put him on trial. This is where they're hunting for him. That's his penitentiary photo from South Carolina. So he is tried and convicted and sentenced to 50 years for killing his brother-in-law And of course, they appeal. But in the meantime, they also try Mr. Janasic, because supposedly he had offered Jacob Smith $10,000 to kill Mr. West to get him out the way so he could marry Mrs. West, which he did 2 months after Mr. West's death. Well, when they were trying Jacob Smith, the brother-in-law, Mr. Janasic was serving on the jury. So that wasn't exactly kosher. You shouldn't have your kinfolk on the jury. So Mr. Janasic was sent to jail. He tried to commit suicide a couple of times, and it kept delaying the trial. So on the appeal, Jacob Smith went back, and the judge says it all has to be thrown out. He's not guilty because y'all violated all the rules by having the kinfolk on the jury. But as soon as he was acquitted of the murder, the South Carolina State Police were here to take him back for escaping from the pit. Mr. Janasic was also cleared of all charges and remained free. And so no one knows to this day, it happened in 1950, who killed Mr. West. The murder at the City Point Inn. This one occurred in 1964 in December the 27th to be exact. Naomi Ann Fulcher Long was living at the City Point Inn. She had separated from her husband and had been living at the City Point Inn for about 4 months. She was quite the little gadabout. She liked to go to the NCO dances at Camp Fort Lee. And as you can see, she was quite attractive. She didn't have a job. She was staying at the City Point Inn. So her next door neighbor kept hearing a loud radio going off. Started going off about 10 o'clock in the morning. Just kept going and going and going. So she went in to check on her. And she was in her bed with an electrical cord tied around her neck. She had been strangled. Well, of course, the first suspect should always be the husband. But we're talking 1964. DNA doesn't mean anything. So it was really hard without witnesses. And they all kind of had alibis. So the husband went on about his life, and nobody supposedly knew who killed Naomi. There have been rumors over the years, and I'm not going to mention any names on the rumors, but of who actually killed her. So they probed and they couldn't find anything, and everybody's stories seemed to agree. But many, many years later, in 2010, they decided to travel to Las Vegas and arrest Naomi's husband. Donald James Long. He had been married 4 times and was living a pretty good life out in Las Vegas. They wanted to bring him back to Hopewell because they said they had finally tested and had DNA on that electrical cord. So they brought him back. And they put him on trial here in Hopewell. But all of a sudden, the district attorney says, ho, 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 ho. Somebody must have tampered with this evidence because there's no DNA from him on this cord. The only fingerprint they had found in the City Point Inn was from a policeman. So they let him go, Mr. Long. The charges are dropped because nobody believed his second wife, who had said he confessed to doing it. But they didn't believe her, and plus his DNA was not on that cord. They had no earthly clue whose DNA was on there. And so Naomi Ann Fulcher Long's murder remains a mystery to this day. The murder on Creekwood Drive. This one is very close to my heart because I grew up with the victim. Her parents and my parents both moved to Hopewell about the same time from Narrows. They had worked at Celanese plant up in Narrows. So we grew up together all through high school. I went one way and Marcia became a med tech at John Randolph Hospital. That's Marcia Jane Moore Rayner. She married Billy Rayner. As you can see, Marcia's quite a lovely young lady and just the most kind, gentle soul you would ever want to meet. She was found stabbed to death 18 times in her home on Creekwood Drive. Her baby daughter, who was 2 years old, was asleep in the crib just a few feet away. Her husband came in from working the graveyard shift at Allied Chemical and found her. He was, of course, ruled out as a suspect because he had been at work. Marcia had been telling some of her co-workers that she was a little afraid of her husband's friend and being at the house if he came by. And he even apparently went to her work and caused a scene at her work in front of some of her co-workers. So she had been telling for about a year that she was afraid of him. That's her death certificate. She was stabbed 18 times with a kitchen knife, butcher knife. Her funeral service was at St. John's Episcopal Church, and it was heavily attended because her family was so well known and she was so well known. That's a picture of Marcia's tombstone. I'm not going to mention the name of the suspect because he still lives in the area. Because even in the 1980, DNA is still really young. So he was acquitted of the murder. So to this day, no one knows who killed Marcia. I am hoping that someone here that's listening has some contacts at the police department, and maybe they could bring that case, whatever evidence they have, and with some of the new techniques and the genetic genealogy, perhaps find who killed Marcia Moore Rayner. So that's a bit about the mysteries, murder, and mayhem that were not caused by me in Hopewell. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And once again, if you would like to look at any more of the slides again, just let me know, and I will do my very best to answer.